So, in Wolfram's A to Z, very casual A to Z of fencing, C is for choreography. And no, I'm not going to demonstrate uh, a choreographed fight because I am sat here in a chair. Um, Basically, it's more a case of because I got into this whole sorry stuff originally through choreography, because back in the day there was sport fencing and there was stage choreography, and those were the only two ways you could get into that kind of thing. Um, my head has a certain mindset for the elements that you can take from how choreography is learned and trained, and what we can adapt from that into our SCA game. And in fact, it applies both to fencing and in armour. Our rapier game and our armoured game. Um, so, for example, as in most martial arts, uh, when you're training someone, training actors or training the stunt performers for a choreographed fight, the most important thing in it is drilling. Right? So this is one of the first things we can learn from how they choreograph things is how important drilling really is. In choreography, it's so that the actors, especially if they are actors and not stunt performers, can learn how to do a sequence of moves by more or less instinct rather than having to think about, oh yeah, I make this move on this count and so on. So that it's safer for them to think of where they're going to be and which stage the fight is at, while the the hands and the legs are doing their thing fairly instinctively. And so that's kind of like a slight sidestep, but mostly overlap from why we drill, which is again for training the muscle memory to do those kind of things, but for our purposes, of course, it's to get in quicker or be more accurate and not have to pause in the middle of a fight to think what to do next. So those are that's the most obvious thing. Of course, when we're actually doing a stage choreography or a choreography on a film set, you find that usually the most experienced of the performers is the one who controls the fight, and usually the most experienced of the performers is the one who will be playing the one who's losing the fight, because then if anything screws up, he's most likely able to catch it and not come a cropper quite as much. And that sort of applies also in most martial arts, where you'll find that whoever's the senior practitioner of at the time, whether it be the senior student or the instructor or whatever, is responsible for whatever happens. But it means that in training, if you're got a training partner or a sparring partner, if you're trying to train a particular thing, especially in defence, um, then you'll be doing the opposite. But if you're trying to train attacking, then it's always better if whoever is senior or whoever is more experienced is the one defending. In a tournament, they'd be more likely to be the one attacking, but in training, it's I find sometimes a good idea, or in fact most times a good idea, if the senior person is the one defending. Again, that comes from background, so it may not work for everybody. Of course, the purpose for choreography is also something that we can make use of in our game when it comes to demos. So the purpose for choreography in films and stage, films and plays, is of course to put on a fight safely and at the same time tell story and character and so on. We of course don't do choreographed fights. We are doing our own fights. May the best person win, etc. But when there's a demo where the public are watching and for recruitment purposes, um, it's it, you want everybody to look good, right? So in choreography, it's the choreographer's job to make sure that no matter who's the bad guy and who's the good guy, and who's taking what part in a particular fight in a show, that they all look good. They each look good enough to beat the other, ideally. And only the director knows in advance who's going to actually win. At demos, it's, I think, having comfy choreography, that it's the job of everybody there, but especially whoever's running the fencing part there, or whoever's running the fighting part there, to make everybody look good. You're not going to attract many sort of people to come along and join in if they see, and this applies to all martial arts, if they see one person wiping the floor with everybody else, the senior instructor or whatever beating the crap out of all the students, nobody's going to come along and say, "Yeah, I want to be one of those students getting embarrassed." I think if you're in that position, if you're running a demo or involved in running a demo, and maybe I'm throwing a cat among the pigeons here, but I think really your responsibility to make everybody look good. And if you're a good instructor or a good teacher or a good coach, you should be able to fight to everybody's level anyway, and so make it look, even if it's an actual fight and it's not predetermined, you can make it look to anybody watching that everybody has a fair chance. And I think that's something that from choreography works well for our game in demos. So the next thing, of course, uh, when it comes to demos, is one thing you can sort of semi-choreograph, I guess, is the idea that normally, of course, it's you get a good blow, that's it. You call it good, and that's it. Of course, it's always nice to be able to stretch it for the audience. So if you're doing a demo for the public, and especially for recruitment purposes, it's always nice to be able to say, okay, let's fix it, as it were, so that, yeah, you're only going to call it good on, say, the third good blow or something, just to give people a little bit more time to watch and be intrigued and lured into it, because that's what you want, right? Um, but there are other things then, when continuing with the training theme, that we can also take for choreography. If you look at what choreography is actually for, and this is true of dance choreography as well as fight choreography, it should tell story and it should tell character. Okay? Now, telling character is less of a thing in our game, unless you really want to have your fighting style uh, as part of your persona, or vice versa, and then obviously then you could go and say, yeah, I'm just going to study this particular form that this particular character or person in history would have fought exactly this way, rather than mixing and matching like most of us actually do. In choreography, the character part comes, for example, look at Han and Greedo, yeah, and it's not really much of a fight, but think Han shoots first. What does that tell us about the characters? Well, it tells us that Greedo is a dangerous threat and Han's quite ruthless. Greedo shoots first. It completely changes the characters in a way that probably George Lucas didn't expect. In as far as, suddenly Greedo is a complete moron who will miss the target from this distance, and Han is a complete moron who will let somebody shoot at him in the head from this distance. The Tower of Joy fight in Game of Thrones is another one where, for some reason, Ned just suddenly decides to wait for death rather than trying to grapple with Arthur Dane, or turn and run for the horse that's about 10 feet behind him or anything like that. the other, I'm going to clip out the other. I said the other too many times. So that's character. Story is a different thing, and story we can actually adapt in training, um, because in a film or a play or a TV show, the story of the choreography, of course, is all the bad guy gets defeated by the good guy, or the bad guy shows how evil he is by killing other guys, whatever. Um, but in our game, the story is the story of the student or yourself, basically, overcoming the problem that you can't get past in what you're trying to learn, or overcoming the deficiency in a type of defense or a type of attack, or handling a particular weapon or something. So suddenly you've got this story where it's the story of, yeah, you learn to use that weapon, or you learn to make that combo, or you learn to whatever. And this is kind of choreography does, and I think what we can actually learn from choreography in overcoming those things is, oh, actually, this relates to something that Duke Sean was saying in his class the other day on Zoom, um, where he was talking about everybody has little deficiencies, and you find and determine and eliminate those deficiencies. That's a choreography, right? That's a story. So you can view that as a choreography, and then what you do is with your training partner, whether it be instructor or student, or just somebody else on the same level, you can say, okay, I can't quite get the idea of making, oh, I don't know, say getting a shot inside somebody's buckler, right? So you can kind of choreograph, okay, during this sparring session, that's what this person wants to learn. So the other person has to, you can sort of say, okay, I want you to attack this way, or you to defend that way, which is kind of semi-choreographed, in order that the person who's trying to learn that move has the opportunity to learn that move. And I know this kind of is stuff that we all do anyway, but it's, to my mind, something that actually relates to choreography, or can be considered a kind of choreography. Which I guess I have a bee in my bonnet about, because I've done choreography and I've done HEMA and I've done SCA, and all three of those groups kind of hate each other, and which is completely, or historically hated each other. Now we all get on a bit better, I think, but you still find that Stadians and HEMAs will tend to sort of look down upon choreography, or at least upon bad choreography, and I find myself sitting in the middle thinking, yeah, but I know why they do it that way. There's a reason. So hopefully this little chat will just bring across, yeah, actually there is still commonalities that we can bring across and actually make use of ourselves, even in completely non-choreographed stuff, because there are elements of choreography, mindset and training that transfer across to our game. So that is C for choreography.